Hey guys, so I'm here at Leslie Run and there's dead worms and dead fish all throughout this water. So, something I just discovered is that if you scrape the creek bed, it's like chemical is coming out of the ground. Can you come here and let me just show this to people. I don't know if you're going to see this in the camera, but watch this. Just see that chemical pop out of the creek. This is disgusting.
Doesn't look good, does it? But we're going to set that aside for a moment, because I saw something today and it made me shake my head. But before I get to that, we're going to do something real quick first. We're going to step out of this current events thing, Ukraine, Ohio, chemical spill. Just step with me for a moment into some hypothetical village. All right, it's just a village. We've gone there before. Longtime viewers of the show will know this. You and I, we live in a village. Out in the wilderness somewhere. All right, we're not technologically advanced. Just 100 people live in the village. It's you, me, we got our huts and whatever, cattle, wives, children, whatever. As part of living in the village, especially a village like that, or it'll apply to any, but different people need to take different roles for the good of the village. And this is part of what I mean. Okay, we're in a 100-person village, bows and arrows. We need to know. We don't have satellites. We don't have internet. We don't have anything. We need to know if somebody's getting ready to attack us. Is there an invading army coming? So we would have somebody or some bodies, a couple people in the village. Their job would be to go out from the village, look around, see what's out there. We need to rely on what they say, that it's true. So when the scout goes out and comes back and says, oh my goodness, it's an enemy village approaching, they're 10 miles away, let's go, get your weapons. We need to, you and I, because that's part of that's one of our institutions. We need to trust implicitly what that person says. We need to know that that person has the village's best interests at heart. We need to know that that person is not biased, not corrupted. We need to know that that person is accurate. We will have a water guy, for sure. Because water's everything, right? You're going to die without it. We need to have somebody whose job it is to go out and procure clean drinking waters. You, I, wife, kids, everybody in the village can drink. So when drinking water guy, when that institution steps up in front of the village and says, good news, found a clean spring, disease-free, been testing it for a while, this spring is good to go, feed it to yourself, your kids, your cattle, your everything else, that is something we have to trust. We live in a village. We don't have time. We don't have the necessary expertise. When water guy comes and says, this water's clean, this water's dirty, you, if we're going to keep running as a village, we have to trust what that guy says is true. Otherwise, it's calamity. Otherwise, I drink the water and turns out it's bad. I'm going to get sick. Otherwise, I don't drink the water. Now I don't. And now you see what I mean? Institutions. As much as individuals, as a country of individuals as we are, institutions are a critical part of what makes any society, from a teeny tiny village to a gigantic nation of 300 million people. You must trust your institutions. And this, I want to focus on this. This is why, from the very, very, very beginning of Trump's presidency, this is why, if you've been watching this show for a while, you saw me screaming over and over and over again, not about Trump, about the institutions. When we were finding out about the corruption at the FBI, when things like COVID hit, and we found out the FDA completely bought and paid for, they've been caught on camera at this point in time saying, oh no, we essentially just take payments from these food companies, drug companies. We basically just take payments to approve whatever. The Center for Disease Control, not only pushing things that don't work like masks or gene therapy, now the Center for Disease Control now getting involved in racism and equity. We have watched, you and I, years now of institutions losing our trust over and over and over again. FBI, it doesn't matter which institution it is. Our medical institutions in this country completely have lost my trust. And I was screaming over and over and over again that the people who run these institutions, the people who run the United States of America, oh, sure, they're all corrupt and powerful and rich and arrogant, all these things, but they are missing something, and this is something that is critical. They only stay in power as long as there is some level of trust in them from the citizens. If that goes away, not only do they lose power, we probably lose our country. You cannot have a nation or a teeny tiny village if the people do not trust the institutions. And I warned over and over again, you are losing trust. You are losing trust. You are losing trust. This is going to end the country. You are losing trust. And they to this day, they can't stop themselves. They won't stop themselves. So I have to tell you, I gave a little snicker when I saw the EPA come out and say this.
As a father, I trust the science. I trust the methodology that this state is using. If the EPA
said that your water
said that my air quality was safe, and the state said that the water has been tested and the water quality is safe, then I would trust those readings. I am asking that they trust the government, and that's hard. We know that there is a lack of trust, which is why the state and the federal government have pledged to be very transparent.
But see, that's not how trust works. And that's the problem. That's not how trust works. You don't get to demand it back. To be honest with you, you don't even really get to ask for it back. If you and I go into a business deal together, we both put in 10 grand, but I take your 10 grand and I embezzle it instead of investing it in our business, I don't get to come say to you, hey man, just trust me again. I don't even get to ask you, hey man, will you trust me again? No, I'm probably never going to get it back, but if anything, I have to earn it back. I can't demand it. I can't ask for it. I can't censor it. Once it's gone, it has to be earned back. And that, for this government, seems like an impossible task. They're not even trying. We're watching chemicals. We don't, let me tell you, I hung out this weekend with one of my buddies because I don't hang out with political people. He works with chemicals, I'll put it that way. Horrible, harsh chemicals. That's what he does for a living, creating tanks and things like that to transport them and store them. It's his specialty, is chemicals and all these nerdy things. And I was talking to him this weekend about what was spilled in Ohio. And I said, what is all this stuff, right? Because you hear all these expert opinions, it's bad, it's really bad. And he said, well, it'll consume you. And I said, what do you mean it'll consume you? He said, the stuff that's in the air, the stuff that's in the water in Ohio, I work with it all the time. And depending on how much you get in your system, it will literally eat your body. Okay, we have a massive chemical spill in Ohio. People are breaking out in rashes. They see things in the water. The animals are dying and acting funny. And instead, the Secretary of Transportation is acting like it's just no biggie.
Look, rail safety is something that has evolved a lot over the years, but there's clearly more that needs to be done because while this horrible situation has gotten a particularly high amount of attention, there are roughly 1,000 cases a year of a train derailing.
What? Oh, this happens all the time? That's what we get from the Secretary of Transportation? I just want to make sure. I did hear that right? Oh, well, look, there's a bunch of them every year. Hey, why is everyone paying attention to this one? No, you see, that's not going to earn my trust back. You, America's institutions, from media to government to medical to EPA to all of them, you don't get to lie to the American people over and over and over and over and over and over and over again over the years. Corrupt, political, biased, lying over and over and over again, and then say, hey, trust us. Oh, I'm just asking you to trust us. By the way, it's no big deal. There's train crashes all the time. That's not how trust works. That's not how trust works. The truth is, we are back in our village. And you don't trust the scouts who tell you the enemy's coming. You think they're lying because they've been lying to you over and over again. You don't trust the water guy who told you he found a fresh source of water. You've caught him lying over and over and over again. And neither the scouts or the water guy get to come tap you on the shoulder. Hey, just trust me. That's not how trust works. The truth is, our village because everyone thinks like you now. They've all been lied to, or at least a huge percentage of them do. The truth is our village is not going to be a village for very much longer unless the institutions in that village try to earn our trust back. And the same thing applies to the United States of America right now. All that may have made you uncomfortable, but I am right.
What do you think is the basis for their calling for your impeachment? Do you think you've done anything wrong?
No, I don't. I think it is a disagreement over policy, and I think it is used for political purposes to continue a negative dialogue about a migration challenge that is not unique to the United States.
A migration challenge that is not unique to the United States of America. When do the impeachment hearings start? Wrap your mind around this, because I was thinking about this morning. It's the reason I wanted to play that for you. I was thinking about this. Wrap your mind around how destructive all the heads of the various departments are. We played the Rear Admiral. What is he? The Department of Transportation. Okay, well, what does that mean? What's the main mode or one of the main things that is needed for transportation of all kinds? Oil and gas. Oil and gas is central to transportation. It's how man moves to and fro on the earth right now. It just does. Either it directly powers what moves you to and fro, or it's an ingredient in what moves you to and fro. It is. And yet the Department of Transportation, Mayor Pete has said everything's a climate decision. That oil and gas is bad. Or Department of Energy, Jennifer Granholm. The Department of Energy, we shouldn't have one of those, but we do. And so it's her job to make sure, hey, we're good to go energy-wise, right? She takes over, and we're promptly shutting down pipelines, wiping out the energy sector. Things like fuel oil have basically doubled. She got there, she's put in a position, and then uses her position to destroy what she's there to take care of. Mayorkas, head of the Department of Homeland Security. His job, again, is the security of the homeland. He gets there and promptly begins attacking the security of the homeland. Do you know how bad, speaking of which, you know how bad illegal immigration is right now? Do you know how brutal it is? It's so brutal that the most crazy communist lefty city in the United States of America, San Francisco, is actually considering changing its sanctuary city status. That's how bad illegal immigration is breaking the United States of America. It's filling up hospitals, it's filling up schools, it's gobbling up resources. It is going to collapse the system. And that, of course, goes all the way back to the Cloward-Piven strategy. That goes back to what we've just talked about it being on purpose. This is something nefarious. This is something that they're doing with a purpose. Again, these people didn't get into office and look at things like our southern border and say to themselves, well, I don't know, I just have a different idea of how to do things. They got into office and they look at our southern border and they think, how can I use my position of power to destroy the United States of America? And that's what they've done. It's what Mayor Pete's done at transportation. It's what Graham Holmes done at energy. It's what Merrick Garland has done as head of the DOJ.
And let there be no doubt, the commitment of the United States to our NATO alliance and Article 5 is rock solid. And every member of NATO knows it. And Russia knows it as well. An attack against one is an attack against all. It's a sacred oath. Sacred oath to defend every inch of NATO territory.
Ukraine isn't part of NATO. They're not part of NATO. But you know what? Let's set all that aside for a moment. Because we'll get to China and everything else here in a moment. There is a question out there that's been on my mind. It's just hanging on my mind. I can't get it off my mind. I actually woke up this morning thinking about this question as it pertains to Russia, Ukraine, and us and the world. One big question, and a question that somebody needs to answer. In fact, the answer to this question really should determine everything from here on out. And the question is simply this. Vladimir Putin. I'm not a fan. I don't know him, don't like him. But Vladimir Putin, Okay, the world has stacked up against Vladimir Putin for his actions in Ukraine. Now, I get all that. I get Putin invaded Ukraine. The world is stacked up against him. I understand it. You understand it. We all get it. We all get who the players are here. The world wants him out. And you're fond, well, you're probably not fond of, but you hear a lot of this. Get him out. Must be defeated at any cost. Nothing for Putin. He must go back to Russia in disgrace. And all these things that sound good, sounds tough. American politicians and political pundits love to get up and say that kind of stuff. We won't give an inch, as if he's out there on the front lines putting rounds downrange. But beyond that, the question is, will Vladimir Putin, is there any scenario at all that will cause Vladimir Putin to pack up his toys and go home, to accept a total loss? He gets nothing. No territory, no concessions, no nothing. All he gets is disgrace and a loss. Is there a way that happens? That is the only question that matters. Because if the answer to that question is yes, okay, then let's figure out how do we make him pack up his toys and go home. However, if the answer to that question is no, well, we need to change some tactics here. And we need to adjust some things here. Did you happen to hear the latest from the NATO chief?
We are also increasingly concerned that China may be planning to provide lethal support for Russia's war. Putin must not win.
Okay. China might start working with Russia to provide lethal aid. I know nobody talks about this, certainly nobody right now talking about Ukraine at all costs, but Russia and China and Iran and Venezuela have done joint military exercises recently. Look, the world is imperfect. The world is ugly. I don't like seeing bombed out apartment buildings, people losing everything in Ukraine. It's horrible. Look, it's all awful. I understand that. I get it. But we're not dealing with your feels or my feels. Let's set emotions aside here for a moment. If Putin won't accept the total loss, yet we are going to send tanks and missiles and everything else with the intention of giving him a total loss, and China is finding itself aligned with Putin, that's two major nuclear powers on the planet who've decided to dig in their heels and say no. Well, I think it's time for you and I to acknowledge something that we don't want to acknowledge. And this is just the reality of it. You've lived your entire life feeling safe from attacks from foreign powers. So have I. It's part of the reason things like Pearl Harbor or 9/11 feel so real to us to this day. You get a visceral reaction when you bring up 9/11 to this day. I do too. Why? We were attacked here. Somebody came here and attacked us in our home. And we as Americans are used to having this wonderful country and wonderful oceans, two of them, Atlantic and Pacific, nice little buffer there, wonderful Navy, wonderful Air Force. We're used to feeling safe from foreign adversaries. But you and I have got to acknowledge something, and we've got to acknowledge it right now. We're not safe from China and Russia here. Oh, I'm not saying they're superior to us. I'm not saying that in any way. I'm not even saying they're superior militarily. We are not dealing with some goat herders in Afghanistan here. We are dealing with powers who can touch you specifically, me specifically, my power gone, my train derailed. We are dealing with foreign powers who have the ability to strike us here at home and hurt us badly. So again, I want to circle back to my question for the third time. I don't know how to take the measure of the man. I know that that's the most important thing in the world. What is the measure of Vladimir Putin? Is there any scenario where he will go home and accept a total loss? And again, if the answer to that question is no, then we have got to change something quickly before we start getting touched here at home. Oh, and did I mention, while China and Russia are forming a military coalition against us and against us, the President of the United States of America can't even answer a simple no to the question when he's asked if he personally is compromised by one of those two big powers.
Mr. Compromised by your family's business relations. Sir, Mr. President, there is
Give me a break, man. You come to my office and ask the question when they have more polite people.
Give me a break, man. That's not an answer, Mr. President. Your son has documented dirty ties to the Communist Party of China. How owned are you? Because you have documented dirty ties to your son in his business dealings. How owned are you by one of the two nuclear powers we're currently making angry on the world stage? That's a legitimate question to ask. And how am I supposed to take it when reports come out that we haven't heard sirens, air raid sirens in Ukraine for days and days and days? And did you know this? Because they don't want to start World War III either, Russia agreed to a ceasefire while Joe Biden was on the ground. So already the air raid sirens have not been going off. Russia has agreed, hey, we're not going to start lobbing artillery shells your way. Don't want to accidentally kill the U.S. president. But the U.S. president goes to visit Ukraine, and instead we get some theater performance organized, clearly organized between the Biden administration and the Ukrainian government to act like he was in danger from the air raids.
I've been here for the past 5 days. I have not heard any explosions. I have not heard any air sirens until about half an hour ago, right when President Biden was in the center of Kyiv.
Oops. I'm starting to feel a little manipulated here. Are you? And the problem is, this isn't some standard domestic political game where they play these games with us and propaganda and they lie. And in the end, we're just a little less free and the money goes, a little bit less far. No, now we're dealing with big boy politics. Now we're dealing with World War III. These little manipulation games by America's communists, they have consequences beyond, I think, what you and I want to sit down and talk about. Oh, and do keep in mind, if that World War III kicks off, this is the human being who's going to be commanding America's armies.
We built a coalition of nations from the Atlantic to the Pacific. NATO in the Atlantic, Japan in the Pacific. I mean, across the world.
I want you to imagine you've been loaded onto a train car against your will. It's hot on the train car, can hardly breathe. Everyone's packed in there like cattle. And you finally get to a big camp. You get off at the camp, and there's a man standing there. He's wearing actually a white lab coat because he's a doctor. And he's looking at the people who are being hauled off the train at gunpoint because this is a death camp. And he's looking around, and he lays his eyes on the person you love the most, whoever that may be, the person you love the most. And he says, that's the one I want. And he grabs him, and he takes him away, and he goes and performs medical experiments on them without the benefit of any anesthesia. I'm going somewhere with this, just hang with me. Eventually you find out that the person you love the most died while essentially being tortured and having their liver taken out without anesthesia. Now that you're there, now that you're in that dark place, just stay with me for a moment. I want you to think about this. I want you to think about you getting called up for jury duty. You got called up for jury duty. All right. Woohoo! You find out when you show up at the trial that it is actually that doctor on trial. But hold on. The doctor, he's not on trial for what he did to your loved one at all. No, he's on trial for unpaid parking tickets. I guess he does this a lot. He's got like 1,000 of them. He's on trial for unpaid parking tickets. And so he's up for serious prison time. He's been warned and finally he won't pay him. He's up for 5-10 years of prison time, and you are going to be on the jury. Let me ask you something. You haven't seen a single piece of evidence in this weird kind of dark hypothetical scenario I just gave you. Obviously, we're talking about a Nazi doctor here. So you haven't seen any evidence yet, but let me ask you something. Are you going to convict that person? Does it even matter what comes out at the trial? Would you care? This is a monster. This is a monster in human form. Is there anything that would stop you from convicting that person? Now, why am I talking about this? Why am I bringing this up? Well, here's why. I am very fond of saying some things that make some people angry. I don't say them because they make people angry. I say them because I believe them. And I realize some of these things are crazy and uncomfortable. One of the things sound crazy. I think they're accurate. But anyway, one of the things I'm fond of telling you is you need to move. If you're in a blue area now, still in the year 2023, you need to pack up and move. If you can. I realize there are job concerns and maybe you're taking care of your sick mother, or I realize there are some people, many people who can't. But if it's possible, you need to relocate your family and get out. Why do I say that? Well, there are a bunch of different reasons. I'm not going to go into all of them again now. Long-time viewers of the show will know the reasons, but one of the reasons I bring up constantly is if you are in a blue area now, it's not like a blue area was in 1980. You have an activist communist mayor. You have an activist communist DA funded by George Soros, put there because he is a communist. He is put there for a purpose, and it is not prosecuting criminals. And you have activist communists who will be sitting on your jury. Sitting on your jury. And these jurors of yours, you know, when that George Soros-funded communist DA takes that lifelong felon and springs him out of jail, and then he comes and tries to stab your wife when you're on the way out of dinner one night, and you have to pull out your firearm and put him down, and it was self-defense, and you're good to go. But you see, it's a Soros-funded DA who's there to help his friends and punish his enemies. So while he's deciding whether or not to charge you, he pulls up your Facebook account and says, wow, look at this right-winger. Hey, you see this Nazi in a MAGA hat? Charge him. Well, if that's the case for you, I want you to pay very close attention to this video. This is the foreman for the grand jury for Donald Trump in Atlanta. I want you to know that when this person sits on your jury, as you sit there in New York, Chicago, I'm not leaving, I love the city, I'm staying blue, baby, California. While you sit there and you just enjoy it up, God forbid you ever get crossways with the law, what do you think this person's going to do with you?
Did you personally want to hear from the former president?
I wanted to hear from the former president, but honestly, I kind of wanted to subpoena the former president because I got to swear everybody in. And so I thought it'd be really cool to get 60 seconds with President Trump of me looking at him and being like, do you solemnly swear? And me getting to swear him in. I kind of just thought that would be an awesome moment.
What would your reaction be if the DA decides against bringing any charges after what you've seen?
I will be sad if nothing happens. Like that's about my only request there is for something to happen. I don't necessarily know what it is. I'm not the legal expert. I'm not the judge. I'm not the lawyers, but I will be frustrated if nothing happens. This was too much information, too much of my time, too much of everyone's time, too much of their time, too much argument in court about getting people to appear before us. There was just too much for this to just be, oh, okay, we're good, bye.
And if it was just a perjury charge, or perjury charges, would that be acceptable to you?
That's fine. I will be happy as long as something happens.
Obviously, this is about Trump, but this is about so much more than Trump. Jesse, stop telling me to move. Jesse, I love LA. I got the breakfast taco place right down at the corner, man. I know. I love LA too. Jesse, I love New York, man. New York City is like my favorite place in the world. I love it too. I get it. I get it. I lived here my whole life. My grandpa lived. I get it. I understand the history. I understand the tradition. I understand the ties. But I want you to understand. There's a reason all the January 6th political prisoners have had the book thrown at them, because every single one of them have been tried in front of 12 jurors, just like that vile little communist, who will without hesitation throw you in a dark hole and rip you away from your family for the rest of your life. Not because you did anything wrong, but because we have a brand new Democrat Party in this country, and they are activist communists, and they mean business. That's why I tell you it over and over and over again, and I'm never going to stop. You are not protected in a blue area. You have no protection. You are naked. You are. Even the cops. What do you have you paid attention to the cops? Have you paid attention to the retirements? Who do you think's retiring? Packing it up, going to turn in their papers. All the good ones. They're all gone. They're all not gone yet, but they are. They're leaving. They're gone. They're not sticking around for this. They're going to go be a cop in Florida somewhere. They're done. They're done with it. You won't even have the cops on your side. Not the cops, not the DA, not the mayor, not the jury. So when I tell people to move, it understandably is a spicy thing to suggest. You inevitably will have people bark back at you and say things like, I'm never leaving, Jesse. I'm standing to fight. And I will tell you, I admire the attitude, and boy, it sounds tough. Sounds tough. You're not leaving at all. Okay. That should be a real comfort to your wife and kids for the next 30 years while they visit you behind a pane of bulletproof glass in state prison because you wanted to stay and fight, and 12 communists looked at your Facebook posts and decided you were a Nazi. You see, they look at you just like you looked at that Nazi in the very beginning of the show. That may make you uncomfortable, but I am right.